Hello friends, my name is Leigh and I create videos about photography as an art and as a lifestyle. Today is quite a bit different. Raymond is going to talk about something that he loves that I am also heavily involved with, and I think it's a pretty inspiring story. So here we go.
If you gather the right people and very intentionally build a culture of success with them, literally anything may be possible. And to that end, I need to explain to you the events surrounding this photo from May 2025. That's me in the dirt, in the middle of the night, somewhere in Arizona, I have no idea where, completely unconscious, lights out. And honestly, the situation is even a bit messier than it appears. On the surface, it's a tale of sleep deprivation, traveling a ridiculously long distance, on foot, and a team that came together to make this picture and some much more interesting things happen. Today, I am going to share 3 things that I've learned in a very tangible way about establishing a culture of success, whether it's within your career, your personal life, your hobbies and clubs, or if you're like me, some weird and abstract combination of each of those. Some things you may or may not know about me. I've been in the corporate world since the mid-1990s. That hurts to say a little bit. I enjoy the art and science of project planning and also the photography and art world. And I'm fascinated by culture within organizations of any size with any purpose. Depending on which world you know me from, you may know me as Thomas or as Raymond. I answer to each most of the time. Knowing all that, I must tell you that there are 2 things that I fear the most in the world: public speaking and extreme long distance running. I will now combine those existential fears, which I truly do enjoy and fear, so I can tell you some things. And while this video is about both of those fears and involves them heavily, it's really not about either one of them at all. It's about getting smart, experienced, and creative people together, working and learning with them toward a shared goal and the camaraderie of the experience along the way. Now that I've told you that this video is not actually about running, let's talk about long distance running. I run very long distances, often over multiple days, and I do this in exchange for high fives and belt buckles. Many other people do this too. The sport is called ultra running. In 2021, I took a sharp left turn and departed from the corporate world. Would it be temporary? Would it be permanent? At that time, I wasn't sure. I was, however, certain about one big thing. I wanted to do something epic. A run or a race that would maybe change everything for me. Perhaps a capstone or even a new beginning after a lifetime of running. It would have to be something that would hurt, potentially a lot, but could ultimately be successful. Now, epic, that's a word that's thrown around frequently these days. I wanted to meet the original definition before social media made simple, everyday things like having breakfast into great epicness. For me, epic is something ridiculously ambitious with a low chance of success, but a high chance of the unexpected. It's got to be in amazing places with maybe a few hundred like-minded people. Now, in the past, I've run for 24 hours, 48 hours, and even 72 hours, often exceeding 100 miles in these pursuits. But at that point in 2021, I'd never exceeded 200 miles in any single run. And while I had run long distances on flat courses, I'd never gone more than about 31 miles at a time on the beautiful and challenging trails of Arizona. And there's one big thing that I never felt that I had ever experienced through these pursuits. That moment. A moment where planning, passion, and execution converge, come together. That peak experience. That run where I could very consciously think in the moment, I'm doing what I planned. I love doing this. I feel great. This moment right now is that higher state of existence that I've been searching for my entire life. It may never be duplicated, but I have it right now. Within running, I've pursued this sensation for decades, and although there certainly have been joyful moments, there has never been that one moment of elevation where it just all came together. I know it exists. I've been so close. I've been on the edge of it, but never over that wall into it. Overall, in my life, I needed to do something different, at least for a while, and fully commit to the training and intensity needed for such an ambitious project. And it did not take much time to select the event, the Cocodona 250. An absolutely insane and intimidating race from the North Phoenix area in Black Canyon City, Arizona, all the way up to Flagstaff, Arizona, predominantly on trails with heartbreaking, seemingly endless elevation gains, and with 257 miles on tap for the race, quite a lot of distance. That would be a lot of distance in a car, and I'd be using my own 2 feet. Now, this was a big change for me. As you may know, in the industries that I serve, I like to make noise, and my wife Leigh does in her industry. It's what excites and terrifies me and us, sharing with others and learning from experts. I just shut all that down. My daily itinerary was to wake up early and run, and then rest for a while, and then run again later in the day. In fact, I did a dangerous thing. I tied my own personal identity and self-worth to success in a race that will beat the shit out of you for days at a time, with extremely rough trails, those huge climbs, and temperatures ranging from over 100 degrees by day and below freezing at night. Now, I am not sorry that I tied my identity to it. I go overboard. It's what I do. I do not recommend this path, but for those who choose that path, I salute and I support you. Some of you have seen me talk about this 2022 effort publicly to audiences in Colorado Springs and National Harbor, Maryland. Many not. So I'll give you the brief summary and then the peculiar aftermath. This aftermath is brand new, and I've never spoken about it publicly before, live or on video, which will be interesting because this whole story today is still quite raw. But to me, that's the exact best time to capture the authenticity of these moments, the highs, the lows, with a side of crippling anxiety and fear to go with it. And I promise that this story and the aftermath leading up to this very day will lead us straight to the 3 things I've learned about establishing a culture of success. And the best way to truly learn these things for oneself is to fail at them. So let's do this. The 2022 edition of this race started very well. I had a crew of 2, my wife and my great friend Rich. Both are talented runners and know what my highs and lows are like out on the trail. Due to some wildfires in the Crown King, Arizona area, the extremely difficult and terrifying first 36 miles of the course were removed and reestablished in what seemed like, on paper at least, an easier group of trails surrounding Prescott, Arizona. The 3 of us took some pictures at the start line, and I was underway, off and moving. It was all pretty casual, in fact. I was prepared for this. I saw my crew of 2 at around 18 miles, then around 40 miles. Now at 65 miles, where I wasn't yet, in downtown Prescott, Rich was set to join me on the course as a pacer. He would be able to move alongside me, and while he wouldn't be able to hand me food, water, or any supplies, nothing beats a little camaraderie out on the course. And Rich and I have run hundreds of miles together, and I've enjoyed every single moment doing that with him. At the 60-mile mark, 20 hours into the race, my optimistic start turned bad, really bad. My body very rapidly became weak and unpredictable. A very nice competitor, Steven, from Canada, was trying to help me. But I had convinced myself that I was in need of a rescue, and seeing that I had cell service and panicking, I jumped into action. I knew better than to trust what I was feeling. There are so many ups and downs in ultra running. You need to savor the highs and work hard and endure through the lows. And while I cannot explain why this low was lower than most, even lower than those races where I had traveled many more miles, the damage was done and I was quickly in the car on the way back home. Leigh's words of reassurance and her text messages had kept me moving forward to her. One of my biggest anxieties in endeavors like this is that I will be in a problematic situation, get lost for hours, and continue a downward spiral, and then just pass out or die or something on the trail. It doesn't make sense, but it's how I think. If I had just gone a few more miles, Rich would have brought me back to life in downtown Prescott, and we would have been off and running. Now, in very long trail races like this, there are time cutoffs along the way at intermediate checkpoints, and I was way ahead of those time cutoffs. I could have slept a full 8 hours at the aid station in Prescott, Arizona, and still had plenty of time to continue on in the race. None of that mattered at this point. I'd made the decision, and after well over a year of very intense training, investing myself solely in preparation for this event, tying my own identity to it, it was done. And it was my own decision, and I really had other options that would have allowed me to continue on. I'd cut myself off, and the race was honestly just getting started. The race didn't beat me. I beat myself. In perfect hindsight, the entire situation is really hard to swallow, and it really does hurt to this day. It was not long before that 2020 hindsight that we all have used at one time or the other, that started creeping in. Had I really been prepared for a race of this magnitude? The answer is yes, I was. Although I certainly could have and should have studied the course better, knowing when to consume energy and when to save it. The rerouting of the most difficult section of the course gave me a false sense of security. The new section really kicked my butt, just like the old one would have. That perfect moment that I was so desperately chasing from this race would have to wait for some other time, if ever. Now, besides fitness and race planning, there was other factors. Leigh was very quick to act when I decided to call it quits. She was worried about me, and I can't blame her for that one bit. From her perspective, I badly needed help.
I'm pretty sure that a 2-hour nap and a cookie would have gotten Raymond back on track, but he did seem pretty out of it, and he did want to go home. I wanted to support him the best way that I could.
This sport can be dangerous, and I was definitely showing signs of extreme fatigue and some confusion. Also, I showed concern for myself, which I usually don't do, so this was a huge red flag for her. I'm usually quite willing to go deep into my own pain cave, telling people around me that I'm fine even when I'm not. I'd called Rich, but a lack of coordination on my part left the calls unanswered. And my wife, who was very quick to pick up the phone, was also very quick to pick up the runner, me. Again, I don't fault her for this. I expressed to her that I was in distress, and she leapt into action as she does, meeting me on the trail to walk me in the final few miles to the car, reassuring me that she was there for me and that I would be okay. I would realize later that the upcoming sections of the 250-mile course were extremely difficult, more so than I expected. And even if I had salvaged things in Prescott, I would have been in for a world of hurt toward the middle of the race. Good planning could have at least set better expectations. I was going way too fast, way too early in this race for what was coming up. All that said, you don't get to go back to do that moment again and do it better. It's over. It's done. After departing the race, I went home and I did something that many of us perhaps have done at one time or another, maybe when we were much younger. I hid in my bed. I even quite poorly tried to arrange the blanket so that you couldn't see me under the covers. And by the next day, I was out training again while the race was still going on for the majority of the 200 plus competitors who didn't quit. I had no injuries. I had no problems. I could have just as easily been running in the race, but I wasn't. Again, for me, it was over. Another day passed, and I started looking at the race's live tracking website. Every participant wears a GPS tracking device. You can see on an active map online where everyone is, who they are, how fast they're going, and even their smiling portrait from before the race. As I clicked through the participants on the map, some I recognized, some I didn't. But there was one that I couldn't really forget about. That very nice man, Steven, from Calgary, who was trying to help me out on the first night of the race. He encouraged me to keep moving, and he made conversation. He was super nice, and you could tell immediately that he had a kind heart. As he was helping me on that first night, encouraging my progress, I started feeling guilty that I was holding him back. I could tell that he was at least slightly compromising his own race to help keep me moving along. And in the state I was in, and the fact that I'd convinced myself that my effort really was done, him slowing down for me really didn't feel right to me. And when the opportunity kind of conveniently presented itself, when he was moving swiftly through the night, I sort of just faded back in the woods, ultimately lessening his burden and letting him work to his true potential so that he had his own race. Now, days later, sitting at my computer, as I saw participant 212, Steven, that nice man from Canada, on the map, I didn't even remember his last name, but I knew his number. I could see that he was in a very, very difficult position in the race. He was at the very back of the pack, and he was doing what's called chasing cutoffs. Let me explain. Chasing cutoffs is an extremely difficult position for any runner to be in. Each aid station has a preset time of day assigned to it. After that time of day has passed, if you have not departed that aid station, you are out of the race. This keeps the race moving along, in this case northward. With Steven, number 212, he would arrive at an aid station needing food, water, and supplies. And he would very quickly be ushered past the edge of the aid station so that the officials there would not need to take him out of the race. Now, he had drop bags. He had supplies at these aid stations with helpful items in them that he needed to grab. So over time, he was accumulating gear and putting it in his bag, more gear than he needed. But he didn't have sufficient time at the aid stations to clear out his pack entirely and go back down to the essentials. He had no crew or family helping him in the race. He was on his own. He had to look out for himself entirely, and the further he progressed in the race, the more tired he would become, the heavier his pack would be, and then everything just starts getting bad. It's a downhill spiral that often leads to a DNF, did not finish, for people. I know exactly what a DNF in this race looks and feels like. Just a few days earlier, I lived my own DNF in the same race that Steven was in right now. Now, every time I watched him go into an aid station on the moving map, it was just about cutoff time. And right at cutoff time, I would see his number move slightly past the aid station, like 1 pixel on my screen. For days, it became an obsession. Watch him go in, watch him come out with minutes or even seconds to spare. But with about 24 hours to go before the final race cutoff of high noon in Flagstaff, Arizona, at the finish line, I could see that Steven was slowing even more. I was reminded of Steven slowing down for me on the first night and trying to help me out. And quickly, I was no longer content to be Steven's remote race stalker. I had to do something more than yell encouragement at my computer screen. And still very raw myself from my own race, I would have to do what I could to help prevent Steven from having a DNF. Now, I didn't have his contact information. I barely knew him. So I texted Race Control, which is a phone number participants are required to have on their cell phone. Race Control is watching over everyone during the race. Soon, they had shared my cell phone number with Steven, and I paced around my house, it's what I do, not sure if Steven would reach out. My wife and I could help Steven get his gear together at Fort Tuthill, coincidentally at mile 212. And at Steven's option, I could be his pacer, keeping him talking and keeping him moving toward the finish. But if he did not want the support, I needed to be prepared to wish him well with words of encouragement and wave goodbye. And Steven texted me back. And I had no idea what he was talking about, but there was a heartbeat and he was on the move. The hallmarks of a true ultra runner, we can work with that. And instantly my own failure in the race did not seem very important at that moment. It was time to rally around Steven and give him the support he needed to get to that finish line in Flagstaff, Arizona. To be candid, I was an emotional wreck at the notion of re-entering this race as crew or pacer or in any capacity. But for me, as potentially a pacer, there was mandatory gear I'd need to repack, and the intense and difficult psychology of putting my own epic failure just days earlier, putting that aside to create a successful culture around Steven that could get him there to that finish line on time, because there's a cutoff there also. Leigh helped with the gear because I was that emotional wreck, and she drove me to Fort Tuthill where we met with Steven. He arrived within about 20 minutes of the aid station cutoff, so we had to move quickly. Leigh emptied out his backpack as quick as she could. She's no nonsense and a fantastic crew member. In some cases, Steven had 3 or 4 redundant items like multiple headlamps that he only needed one of. Again, he'd been chasing cutoffs and there was no time for him to optimize, only to move forward. So Leigh was his crew, his entire crew, and I would be his pacer. Steven now had the team that he needed to potentially survive and finish this race. When Steven and I departed Fort Tuthill together, I could tell that he had new life. He was moving quickly, but he had also not slept in a few days. All the while, as I moved forward with energetic and tired Steven, Leigh was watching, the course marshals were watching, and soon the ultra running community and the larger community would be watching as well. We had 2 aid stations to get into and get out of before the finish. The first was Walnut Canyon. Steven needed to sleep there. I didn't dispute that at all. And I've never seen anything quite like what he did. He walked up to a tree and he just seamlessly laid down in the dirt, face down in front of this tree. It's called the dirt nap, and I've seen plenty and I've taken plenty, but I've never seen someone just slide into it like he did. Just right there. But very soon we had to leave. We at least had to get out of the parking lot to avoid being cut off. And then Steven was back in the dirt. He said he needed 30 minutes. We had no time. So after about 4 minutes, I lied to him. I woke him and I told him that it had been 30 minutes. It had not been. It had only been a few, and I'm not sorry. If this effort was going to be successful, we had to move. There were no other options. And we did move through the night. A couple of naps, some pep talks, and an absolutely mad run down a fire road to make up time that we badly needed. And even with just a couple of miles to go, this was not a done deal. Runners from all over were gathering at Heritage Square in downtown Flagstaff to see what would happen. Could he make it? Would he make it? He had until noon, and let's just say it was very late morning with still several miles to go. Leigh calls me up to ask if we're gonna make it. She's sending photos of the gathering crowd. There's drones overhead checking on us, and all of this with Steven in a very foggy state, somewhere between awake and asleep. And this is being live streamed to thousands of viewers. There was pressure, but we had some things in our favor. We had a very highly motivated Steven to use his grit and get to that finish line. I was very well rested after my own failure. The course sweepers were encouraging us, and a lot of people were counting on a storybook ending for Steven and helping to cheer him in. All of those things will get you moving. Plus, a culture was growing very closely around Steven. A modest but very real culture of success. A culture that would ultimately help him get across the finish line with 3.5 minutes to spare in a race with a 125-hour time limit. That's a blink of an eye, and this was not lost on the community. The finish line was outrageous with joy and support. As I stepped aside, became invisible, my part done.
Let's take a quick look at what it was like to be there and experience Steven's amazing race finish.
There he is, Stephen Park, about to make the right-hand turn.
I am.
You hear the reaction?
Oh my God! I'm
gonna need Jamil to try and get the shot from the back because we can't see the finish from the front here. Absolutely incredible.
This is amazing. This is nothing short of amazing to come around that turn and see this.
It is, ladies.
This amazing reception. That was nothing short of spectacular, Matt. That was unreal. It was
absolutely incredible.
And looks like Steven is Steven has done it in just a shade under 11 hours and 57 minutes. Stephen Park is the final finisher of the Cocodona 250 in 2022.
It was time for Steven to have his moment, his peak experience, and he did. And to this day, I could not be more proud of him, using all of his perseverance and grit. In fact, when the sport's top journalistic media, Ultra Running Magazine, highlighted the race that summer, it was not the race winner on the cover of the magazine. It was Steven, demonstrating himself to be an unstoppable force that brought him to his hundreds of new fans.
I would be remiss not to interrupt to take a moment and appreciate the iconic race photography from Howie Stern. That guy is a legend.
When you're last in an incredible ultra like this, you're known as DFL, dead something last. And you're well known as the person with the most persistence who was out there the longest. You didn't win, but you made it, and a lot of people don't. And in Steven's case, he barely made it, which made it that much more special and crazy. I was proud to help, but this was Steven's finish, not mine. My foot never touched the finish line. I made sure of it. I was so happy for him and proud of him. I also knew that my own failure was going to bother me for quite some time, and it did, and it still does, but I would not change a thing. I had to take a very hard look at those things that went wrong. I had not studied the course sufficiently, particularly the changes. I underestimated them by quite a bit. I made up my mind to quit very quickly, practically a spur-of-the-moment decision, and when I did, my wife was quick to fetch me and get me out of there as I had requested. This was in contrast to Steven's finish. He persisted even when basically getting kicked out of aid stations. That's not something that happened to me. I had plenty of time. He had support. He had me keeping him on pace. And he had the running community and the people of Flagstaff pulling him toward that finish. And we had Leigh as the eye in the sky for him, helping assure that both he and I had heartbeats and were moving forward, those hallmarks. Even though on paper, Steven's run wasn't going well, on paper it was going quite bad. Steven seemed pretty chill about it, and ultimately he was successful. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I could learn from his performance and from Steven himself, and I had literally just met him. Now, Steven spent a few days at my house to recover. That's when I really got to know him, and then we were able to successfully get him up and walking and send him back to his family in Calgary, who missed him very much. At that point, regular life resumed, both for Steven and I. Meanwhile, I had some other things to fix besides and including my own ego and attitudes. I was not happy with my sudden career move in 2021 to not have a career. I fixed that just a couple of months after my race failure. And I knew to keep running even with no specific goal in mind. It's just good for me. 2023 would be way too soon for me to mentally re-engage with this particular race, but I do many other shorter races during the year. And during 2023 and 24, I tried to bring a little more of Steven's unstoppable spirit and grit and chill nature into my own running. For one, I told everyone the story about Steven, whether they wanted to listen or not, and most people were interested in the story behind Steven's amazing finish. And in that process, I started talking to more people at races. Now that might seem pretty normal, but if you know me, you know I can be pretty quiet and guarded around people that I don't know. I threw those filters away and made some great friends in the ultra running community. More good friends than I'd made in the previous couple of decades. In fact, I was having more fun with running than ever, even after this epic failure of mine in 2022. While Steven's success was not my success, it sure did get me motivated to be a better runner and a better person. Thank you, Steven. I mean it. You helped me work on myself just by being yourself and the person that you are. In 2024, I started to feel the itch. And while the 2024 Cocodona 250 was happening, I decided that I would make another attempt in 2025, 3 years after my failure and Steven's last second finish. But to do it right, I would need to make some changes. For one, I asked Steven if he could help me as part of my crew and as a pacer. True to my nature, I did this on LinkedIn. Steven immediately said that he would. I was so inspired by Steven's attitude towards this race and his successful finish that I knew I would need the cultural elements that he specifically and personally brings to my team. With his acceptance, I knew I could move forward. And then something happened that I never experienced before. Several of the running friends that I'd met since that 2022 failure heard that I'd do the race in 2025, and they volunteered to be a part of my crew and maybe do some pacing. I can only say yes to that. Crewing for a race like this is a huge commitment. It takes a week of their time and much more than that in preparation leading up to the race. During race week, there's almost no sleep for anyone. And now that I more fully know and respect the course, I know that helping as crew, a pacer, or both is absolutely no walk in the park. I would be tested, and the people working to help me would be tested to the limit. By the end of the week, runner and crew will be completely physically and emotionally exhausted from this race. It's a guarantee. And as I spoke with the crew over the span of months, I could see things coming together. I could see the crew interacting with me and each other, and the phrase culture of success kept coming to mind. And the more we talked, the more we addressed the possible ways to fail at this race and how we would work together to prevent and fix any problems that came up. But we didn't leave it there. We discussed success and what that would look like. I was very clear with the crew that I was willing to risk physical injury and quite a lot of emotional distress in order to finish this race on my second attempt. At the advice of Mitch, my fearless crew chief, I met with and contracted a company called Chaos Crewing that worked with all of us to produce an entire written plan for the race, down to my favorite foods, sleep requirements, and literally everything else. Let's look at this for a moment. I had inspiration from Steven, bringing a tailwind to my training. I had a crew voluntarily wanting to help with a stressful, exhausting, and hopefully successful effort. A third-party company engaged to bring their extensive experience to help put the whole puzzle together. And most importantly, a renewed energy to go to specific areas of the course and actually train on the race course. And then meeting new friends when doing that. Maybe the real race is the friends we made along the way. You know what? It's not. You got to do the race. And while I was trying not to get too excited, I could really see things coming together much differently and much better than in 2022. Something was really happening, and you could sense that this effort would be radically different from the first. Now, Rich, from my first effort, he was on board too, but there was a problem. He could only be on board with some moral support. He had recently had surgery, which would keep him from pacing duty or even riding with the crew. This was a huge loss because Rich knows me very well and there's no replacing him, but there was no option to really have him out there. But I could visualize how this culture of success we were all creating together would still leverage his abilities and his strengths beyond his ability to be physically present during the race. A month away from the race, one of my pacers, Mark, he even joined me to practice the treacherous first 36 miles of the course with about 40 other brave runners. I knew it was a rough section, but it was much steeper and hotter than I expected, and Mark helped me pull through. In fact, without him, I'm not sure I would have kept going at the 20-mile mark when there were 16 miles left to go. He was a huge help, and it was unexpected that he would come to this practice run and do it with me, and I'm grateful that he did. Mark represented that culture, telling me, we're here for you, even when you're practicing. We will have learned firsthand what you'd been through in the first section so that we can help you the most and the best. It felt good what we were putting together, a culture of success. One thing I know, though, is that the assembled crew, the crew book, the logistics all worked out. That's great. All very necessary. But you still need to run the race. I would need to perform. I'd need to listen to my crew. I would need to keep my head in the game and move my own body for 257 fucking miles on time to get this race done. I learned in 2022 that everything is great until your mind tells you that you absolutely need to go home right now. Could that happen again? It absolutely could. And buckle up because, well, here we go. Race day arrived and I was so damn ready. I would have started a day or a week early if they'd let me. The training was done, the crew was ready, everything was in place, planned down to the minute. The starting line was a culture of optimism and positivity. Even though about 1/3 of the 300 participants do not finish a race like this, you can't think that way at the start line. You gotta be happy, you gotta be ready to go. You gotta soak in the crowd, soak in the experience with the other runners, and get yourself just ready to get out there and do it. You're all out there ready to do your best and deliver. You're ready to find out who you really are. Early in the race, already, this culture of success was paying off. 1 month earlier, I had nearly been ready to quit the practice run of the first section that I was on in the race right now. And on May 5th, 2025, I was moving through that section swiftly, but in a calculated, smart, and experienced fashion. I knew the severe climbs, I knew the rocky surfaces, and how scarce water refills would be in that first section. I was moving comfortably, optimistic, and very focused. The only thing on my mind was to keep moving, not risk injury, and see my crew at mile 36 for a clothing change, a good foot cleaning, and then they would send me off into the night. And they delivered on that with the precision of a Formula One pit stop. They had me unequipped from the day and re-equipped for the night. It felt good. I felt sleek and fast, and my crew was so upbeat and positive, which they knew that I would need. They waved goodbye at mile 36 with me going off into the night alone. It wouldn't be until mile 77 in Whiskey Row, downtown Prescott, Arizona, that I could see them and then also have a pacer. Just like I had been for Stephen in 2022. And just like 2022 in my race, all I would have to do would be to get to Prescott. I failed before, but I didn't think I would this time. Until mile 55. Something started happening to my back. Started getting a little tight. This stuff happens. At this point, I had been on the move for about 22 hours. Stuff's gonna get tired, and it did very quickly. This is normally a sign that nutrition is lacking, especially when the onset is as fast as it was. And my nutrition was lacking. But I don't think I initially realized quite how much nutrition I needed, and by the time I did, my back was in knots and began to periodically spasm. I finished a very difficult climb and made it to the aid station at mile 61. I had a good breakfast. I would need to get to an aid station at mile 68 and then meet my crew in Prescott at mile 77. But I'm going to tell you something. I was struggling a lot. And it wasn't lost on me that 3 years after my previous attempt, I was once again struggling to make my way to Prescott, Arizona to get to my crew and pacer. And I was just a few miles out. I called the crew several times just to complain about my condition. I told them I was in distress and that this probably was not going to work out. What did they do? Let me give you an example. This is me calling Mark. Mark, I'm in distress. My back is locked up. I'm bent way over to the side. I just took a wrong turn and did 2 extra miles. This isn't working. Mark, without missing a beat, says, Tom, just get back to us. We're going to take care of all of this. You have nothing to worry about. We've got you. I responded, Mark, you don't understand. I am in distress. And then Mark said, Tom, you have nothing to worry about. We're going to get you some rest, some good food, and take care of this. See you soon. Bye. To give you an example of how bad I looked, as I shuffled my way into Prescott, sticks here, I'm all crooked. A woman approaches me on the street in Prescott. I've never met her before, but she could see me wincing in pain with each step. And she came up to me and she said, I'm going to pray for you. And I said, thank you. And then she started praying right there loudly in the streets of Prescott, Arizona. People around me could see that I was hurting and struggling, and they were doing what felt right to them to help move me along. All I wanted to do was to make sure that I did not pass out in front of people and not become an inconvenience. Alongside public speaking and long distance running, merely being an inconvenience to people is absolutely my 3rd largest fear. Now, I did make it to Prescott, and the last 9 miles of walking, struggling into Prescott took me 7 hours. And while they knew I was struggling, my crew met me out on the street in Prescott, happy as anything, and guided me into the aid station so that I didn't have to look around, I didn't have to think. There they were. And there was Rich at the aid station, very recently out of surgery, and he had his knee scooter, and he was there to put a smile on my face and see how I was doing. I'd never made it to him in 2022, and there I was with him in 2025 in Prescott with Rich and the remainder of the crew. And while there's nothing funny about Rich's injury or surgery, his knee scooter is a hilarious accessory, and it made me smile. And I reminded myself that I never got to Prescott, where Rich was waiting for me in 2022. And here we were in 25, talking and laughing with some crying and complaining. But the crew went to work on me, and they put me to bed for a 2-hour nap. We were only a few hours from the time cutoff, so normally a 2-hour nap would not have been on my agenda. But I really do have to confess, I thought my race was over at that point. With the amount of pain that I'd been in, so sleeping down to the wire like that, it didn't bother me a bit. In my mind, this effort was over. Might as well get a nap. I accepted it. Another failure. What I was not aware of, despite my best efforts to bring this team down and quit from this race, convincing myself that the pain was too much, the team was busy conspiring for my success. Even at this early phase of the race, this had quickly become their habit, and they worked together seamlessly around this goal. Some members of my team never having met the others in person until that day. To them, the goal was clear and obvious. Work together, get me to the finish line. And just as Leigh had repacked Steven's hydration pack in 2022, this crew of experienced runners replanned and repacked every piece of gear that I would need for the long, cold night north of Prescott, creating the lightest pack possible while still meeting the mandatory gear requirements and my food and water needs. They didn't just optimize, they went all out. This pack was light. They did remove the toilet paper from the pack. Without getting into details, maybe next time we leave the toilet paper in. Now, in seriousness, they did everything great. One small hiccup. They knew I would need as little weight as possible on my back to give me a chance of active recovery. There was no static recovery. There was no time to rest. The recovery would need to happen on the move. I was the project for them. I'd worked to create them as a team in this culture, and now it was really put to the test. But it was operating on its own thing, its own entity. And any attempt that I made to bring the culture down, to lay down and say, it doesn't matter, I'm quitting anyway, this race is over, I kept trying to write the race off, to throw the goal away. It just seemed to charge them up and make them happier, which in turn made me increasingly maniacal about making this race successful together as a team. I emerged from my nap and they suited me up. I didn't have to think about anything. They had new clothes on me. They had my favorite hat on my head. Every detail was put in place. A lighter pack and positive energy that I started to believe could carry me for miles, at least a few. And while I did not see myself completing the race, I told the team and my first pacer, Taylor, that I would move forward. And if I got timed out of the race, so be it. I would take it to the limit, chase cutoffs, and see where that got us. I truly did believe that I would ultimately get cut off, but I was willing to let that happen rather than cut myself off as I had done just a few years earlier. In fact, with just 2 hours before cutoff, we were ready to move, and I was even feeling a bit happy, saluting my crew with a sarcastic but genuine show of love on my way out onto the trail. They'd rallied together and worked that culture of success so well that my own best efforts to drop from the race were unsuccessful. And while I did not see a clear road to success in front of me, I could feel myself letting go and letting whatever happen. Rather than try to control everything myself, the team really was working together and solving problems, even when I insisted that they couldn't and shouldn't. Taylor pacing me first was no accident. It was part of the plan that was designed long before the race. Taylor's a very strong runner and also fairly new to the sport. He helps me enjoy running. Every time we run together, we talk for hours. We laugh, and even though I only met him in the past couple of years, when you meet a lifelong friend, sometimes you know it right away. Coming out of my darkest hours, having Taylor with me, it was very special. And Taylor, I'll never forget that night. It was great, it was very special, but there was some really hard work still to go. We were not even at mile 100 yet. As Taylor and I were working together, this race was basically still getting started. Now, the first section after downtown Prescott involved some very difficult to navigate granite dells and boulders. Taylor took one for the team. He did all of the navigation. His phone out in front of him, hand freezing the entire time. I'm bundled up, just following him as he pranced ahead, cold, like a jackrabbit, showing me the path. Two things happened. For one, I was moving, and I was moving pain-free for the first time in a day. Secondly, Taylor froze that night. He froze badly, and it became very close to being a dangerous situation. He sacrificed any sense of his own comfort to navigate very difficult territory in the rain, staying out in front of me to keep me moving, which was the most important thing for the team right now. And when I say Taylor froze, he really did, and he did a great job of pretending to me that he didn't. He brought his own experience, but he was learning on the fly exactly what I needed to keep moving forward. By early morning, Taylor and I were navigating the very difficult climb up Mingus Mountain. This was the end of his shift, and he took that big one for the team. He brought me from around mile 77 to 106. And thanks to Taylor, I was starting to see that this race could be achievable. But still, over 150 miles remaining, so this would be no walk in the park. Like Steven in 2022, I had a heartbeat and I was moving forward. Taylor assured that, and I absolutely could not have made the progress that I did without him. My second pacer is Mark, again, by design. Mark wins races. He's experienced at three things: racing, finishing, and winning. Oh, and he's a fire chief and paramedic. Mark won a 6-day race recently with over 450 miles covered. He's a great friend and I love chatting with him. But when Mark runs, he is all business. And the central part of this course, from Mingus Mountain through Jerome, Arizona, and through all of Sedona, and then up the Mogollon Rim, this section is all business. Having Mark for this nearly 100-mile section was a calculated decision. He sets a tone of drive and intensity. Move first, ask questions later. Mark and I were moving well, not quite as fast as I wanted, and our feet were soaking wet and muddy. Most of the first 3 days of this race were wet, and that will take a toll on your feet, and it was. That was not the biggest problem I was dealing with. The crew's recovery operation of me in Prescott, it took a lot of time. I had planned to sleep about 3 hours most nights of the race, and up to 5 hours at the end of Sedona, around mile 190. There was some time for sleep, not much, and I was not willing to risk it, and I was being stubborn about it. So while things started out well with Mark, as we got into our second day together, we were both getting tired, feet wet for days. I wasn't concerned yet. There's no time for that with Mark. With Mark, you move. But in the back of my mind, I knew that the latter stages of the race would be tough sledding. A lack of sleep, trench foot, and some occasional twinges from my back. These were all just enough to remind me to keep my nutrition up and listen to my crew. They were crushing it. And at each aid station, every 15 to 20 miles, they were also strongly encouraging me to sleep. Now, I want to tell you something. I am not a gifted or talented runner, but one thing I've learned to do in multi-day races is to sacrifice sleep for some more miles. This can sometimes make me competitive in races ranging between 24 and 72 hours. While other competitors are getting sleep, I sometimes just have the ability to go days without sleep. It's not ideal, but when I feel it's necessary, it's something I can do. The crew wanted me to sleep. I resisted, we compromised. I would leave an aid station with my next pacer, but we would nap in the dirt when I needed some sleep. Not ideal, but I wanted to keep a several-hour time cushion ahead of those cutoffs, so I wanted to sleep as minimally as possible. Now, when I think of dirt naps, there's one person that I think of, Steven, helping me this time, and I'm going to tell you something in hindsight, and I almost hate to admit this. It was tough with Steven. He was dealing with a really tired runner. The crew was right. I should have slept at the aid station when they were begging me to on the proper mattress that they had for me. So let me break the fourth wall for a moment. Leigh, Mitch, Rich, Taylor, Steven, and Mark, you were right. I am sorry. I mean it. Without that sleep that you wanted me to take, things got really rough. It is what it is, though, and Steven and I went together from Munns Park to Fort Tuthill. I think. I was in bad shape. It was early Friday morning, and I had not slept since Tuesday night for 2 hours. I was hallucinating badly. I forgot the name of the race. I would occasionally wonder where I was running to and why. And for a few moments, I did not recognize Steven as someone that I even knew. But Steven had my back. He kept an eye on me. He made sure I ate. And while years earlier I was lying to Steven about how long his naps were, he was now lying to me, telling me that my naps were shorter than they really were, because he knew I needed the additional rest. He was making me successful and was committed to it, whether I agreed to the process or not. He applied his experience, learned my state of mind and capabilities on the fly, and made decisions to lead me to that clear objective, the finish line. That's exactly what I needed, and he delivered on it. It was 2022 again, but the roles were reversed. And this is exactly why I chose Steven as my third and final pacer, to bring me to the finish, leading me with his level of grit that's just truly inspiring. Before Steven and I could potentially bring it home together, there was one more obstacle. I would need to traverse mile 215, Fort Tuthill, to Walnut Canyon, mile 230, solo by myself, no Steven. Due to some endangered wildlife habitats in the area, the race would have to minimize foot traffic through this section, and I'd have to run 15 miles alone, no pacer, hours without my crew. I finally did sleep for a short while beforehand in the bed of Mitch's truck. Mitch was my crew chief. More about him in a short while. Mark fixed my feet, now badly blistered, and the team sent me off on my own with a flood of positivity and optimism. Well, I couldn't help but wonder if they were just a bit concerned about my ability to travel solo for a few hours. The good news is that I know this section of the course well, and I even made my own inspirational playlist for it, knowing that I'd have to keep my endorphins and serotonin up, or I'd just fall into the dirt and cry 200 miles in. Back from the dead at mile 77, and now I'd be on my own again. It wasn't lost on me that I had been on my own when things started spiraling and got bad at around mile 55. And while I initially disliked having to do this section of the race without a pacer, I received motivational text messages from my crew and other friends who were following along the race. I had some time to myself to process what was happening too. While over the past few days I'd had severe doubts about my ability to finish the race, my crew never did. They never one time gave up on me or even listened to me when I tried to give up on myself. I spent those 15 miles not thinking about myself. I thought about Leigh, Mitch, Taylor, Mark, Stephen, and Rich. And how for 1 week in 2025, they put everything else aside for them, their families, their jobs, proper sleep, to selflessly assure that I could maybe achieve the most audacious goal of a lifetime. In my search to find out who I am through this race, I learned something entirely different. I learned how people can come together and work toward a clear and obvious goal and make something happen, something that at many points seemed and felt impossible. The goal simply being 2 words: finish line. They didn't take the steps for me, not the physical steps, but they created a culture that made it easy and less painful to take those steps. It was now Friday morning, and 3 days earlier on that Tuesday evening, I had been trying to quit this race. I called ahead to quit, trying to convince my team that I could not continue on, that the pain was too much, and that there was nothing left for me to do. And there it was. As I approached my crew once again towards the end of this 15-mile stretch, it was that perfect moment. The preparation, passion, execution, and the culture created by this now high-performing team of a crew all converged. It was the peak experience. It was the moment. The moment I trained, practiced, and rehearsed a lifetime for. The moment that never would have happened if I'd left the race on Tuesday as I'd tried to. The crew pushing me back into the ring for another round and another at each aid station. Right now there was still over a marathon left to go, but in the height of that experience right then, elevated by this incredible group, this was the first moment that I knew unquestionably that the goal would be met, and the first time that I let myself believe that I could. I now had the full faith that no matter what happened, no matter how indescribably bad of a problem that could occur, the team would simply work together to quickly learn the issue, figure it out, fix it, and send me back out. Before I knew it, I was reunited with Stephen, and now we could be together for the remainder of the race, all the way to the finish line. This remainder required a climb up Mount Eldon, 2,000 feet of vertical, while starting at over 7,000 feet of elevation. I've done this section. I was ready, and it was slow. And Stephen was very patient with me. Wet feet from days earlier were now very painful feet. Each step just hurt a lot. My mind was lost and confused. That lack of sleep totally had caught up to me at this point. Stephen was my beacon. He was my guide as we would approach the last stages of the race. I knew with him I'd be safe. I knew I would get there. And just as I'd been there for him in 2022, he was now here for me. And he wanted this finish as much as I did, and I knew that he did. Anytime doubt crept in, I could say to myself, no, this is Steven and I. We did the impossible in 2022. Dude was on a magazine cover. We are unstoppable. I was saying that stuff out loud, but Steven probably just heard me mumbling to myself because we were getting there. It was the middle of the night. We had a 6-hour time cushion. I needed rest, but I did not want this to get down to the wire, and it was time to get to that finish line and then rest, and we did. In the very early hours of the morning, the goal was met. My feet hurt like mad, my back was hurting again, and I'd slept about 5 hours total in 5 days. But finishing this race and the here and now of that night was the only thing that mattered. This crew never missed a beat, and that included the finish line. Just an hour or two before sunrise, they were there for me with hugs and love. I'm going to tell you, I hardly remember the individual moments. I was really tired, but I knew I was across the finish line, and I knew the crew would get me to the kitchen floor and then to bed. As I had done during the race, I could let go after the race and just trust them to keep me safe and get me home. For me, this had started as a race. There's a lot of races out there, some tougher than others. What this turned into was a firsthand experience with a winning culture, a culture of success. This was done by getting the right people together, getting them working together, and ultimately learning to place complete trust in each other. Even when I tried to call it off on that second day, they wouldn't hear of it, they wouldn't indulge it, they really didn't acknowledge it. There was one team member, me, who temporarily lost belief in the mission, but it didn't matter. They were so bought in, efficient, and collaborative that losing the drive of one member, it didn't compromise the goal at all. Even though I'd be the one that would need to keep moving and was the one who was trying to quit, they healed my mind and my body. And I'm going to tell you, I've never experienced anything like that, and I don't think I ever will again. It taught me something about culture, more than you can learn in a classroom or in a book. It taught me through experience, a very personal one. I will tell you this, if you gather the right people and build the right culture around them, anything is possible. With a team obsessed with success toward a clear and obvious goal, this race was successful before it began. But I needed to learn and be convinced, and now I am. They brought their experience from their own adventures, but also the curiosity, willingness, and eagerness to learn from each other, the race, and whatever the messy situation of the moment was. Every team needs a leader. This was a team of leaders, but Mitch, you grabbed the responsibility of crew chief. You did not take it lightly. You got everyone where they needed to be. You organized, you solved, you arrived early at every aid station. I don't think that you slept any more than I did, probably less.
I'm gonna headlamps up the mountain.
Adios.
First time.
44. See you in a few hours.
You basically had that crew book memorized. You stood me up when it was not easy for me to do. You hugged me, treating me like a real person when I was barely functioning as one, just so tired. You invested yourself and you kept the whole team completely focused. I'm not the leader that you are, Mitch. I'm not the runner that Mark is. Very few people are. I don't have the grit that Steven has. I don't have the deep knowledge of ultra running and intelligence for the sport that Rich has. I don't have that intangible youthful zest that Taylor brings. And I don't have the gift of compassion and practicality that Leigh has. The way that you all united, your unique strengths, intelligence, and experience, pushing and pulling a runner to a ridiculous goal, in learning and solving each new problem I threw at you guys. I'm 51 years old and I'm still learning every single day. And for 5 days in May 2025, I was seeking to have that moment and learn who I was. And I learned so much more than that. And the only question now is whether it's this race or something equally impossible. Which one of you from my crew is the next up? Because I can't wait to get this group back together and see what we all can do. I will help any way that I can, but one of you is going to be the runner this time. I'm going to sit the next one out. Thank you, Leigh, Mitch, Rich, Mark, Taylor, and Steven. Thank you to Chaos Crewing for that wonderful book. Thank you to Aravipa Running for hosting events like this that help us all learn and find out who we are and who our friends are. And thank you all for watching.